Her children decided she needed care. That was how Derek explained it to the staff at Cedarbrook Care Center on the morning of the intake, not that they had made a decision about their mother's life, but that they had recognized a need and responded to it responsibly. He used that word twice, responsibly. He signed the paperwork with the efficient pen stroke of a man who had prepared for this appointment and was already thinking about the next one. Carla stood beside him and said very little. They left before lunch. That was 11 months ago. Rosalind was in room 12 now. She knew the ceiling of room 12 the way she had once known the ceiling of the bedroom she had shared with her husband for 41 years. Every crack, every shadow, every place the light changed through the day. She had learned it the way you learn things when you have nowhere else to look. 3 months after she arrived at Cedarbrook, Derek sold the house. She did not know this yet. On the night the blue envelope slid out from under her bed, Rosalind Hester was running a fever of 39.8 degrees and had been since early evening. She was not aware of the envelope. She was not aware of much. She was in the particular altered state of a high fever, present and absent, at the same time the world coming in and going out like a signal in bad weather. Amara Osei had checked on her 4 times since 10 p.m. At 2:14 in the morning she came in again. She dimmed the light the way she always dimmed it, low enough to work, not so low she couldn't see, and stood at the bedside and checked the chart and checked Rosalind's temperature and adjusted the blanket that had worked itself loose at the foot of the bed. She was moving quietly and efficiently the way she moved through every room on the night shift, 11 years of practice making her presence almost weightless. Her foot touched something on the floor. She looked down. A blue envelope face up on the linoleum pushed out from under the bed. The small cardboard box Rosalind kept there had been nudged in the night, and the envelope had slid out from inside it and come to rest in the middle of the floor. Amara reached down and picked it up. She turned it over. On the front in red ink, a notation in a careful hand, "Deliver to patient. Only do not redirect." The return address read Cho and Associates Attorneys at Law. Amara stood in room 12 at 2:14 in the morning and looked at Rosalind asleep feverish, her silver hair loose against the pillow, her breathing shallow but steady, and then looked at the envelope and then looked at the notation again. She read it a second time. She folded the envelope carefully along its existing crease and placed it in the front pocket of her scrubs. She tucked it flat against her chest. She said quietly to the sleeping woman in the bed, "I'll keep it safe until morning." She pulled the chair from the corner to the bedside. She sat down. She dimmed the light 1 degree further. She did not leave. Morning rounds at Cedarbrook began at 6, and Amara did them in the same order every time she worked a night into a Tuesday East Corridor first, then the common room check, then the 4 rooms at the end of the West Hall, and last, always last, room 12. Not because Rosalind required more medical attention than the others, because room 12 took longer than the others and Amara had learned to save it for the end of the shift when she could afford to stay a few minutes past the chart and the vitals and the handover notes. Room 12 was the most personal room on the West Hall. This was not an accident. Rosalind Hester had arrived at Cedarbrook 11 months ago with 3 bags and a wooden keepsake box, and in 11 months she had arranged the room with the particular attention of a woman who understood that this was where she lived now and had decided to live in it accordingly. A small rug beside the bed, blue oval bought from the gift shop in the lobby the second week, sheet music on the windowsill organized into a neat stack held flat by a smooth river stone, the photograph of Petra on the nightstand in a silver frame that had come from the house. She could not play here. There was no piano at Cedarbrook, or rather there was one in the common room that was kept locked except for scheduled activities. But Rosalind kept the sheet music because she read it the way other people read novels, following the phrases across the page, hearing them in her mind, marking the ones she wanted to return to. 38 years of teaching had made the language of music as natural to her as speech, and she was not willing to give up a language simply because the instrument was unavailable. Amara checked her vitals. Normal. Rosalind was awake, her reading glasses low on her nose, a page of Schubert tilted toward the window light. "Good morning, Mrs. Hester." Rosalind looked up. "Good morning, Amara. You worked the night again." "Weekend shift." You should sleep. After you! Rosalind made a small sound that was not quite a laugh, but carried the same warmth. She returned to the Schubert. Amara made her notes and moved on. The keepsake box lived under the bed, pushed back against the wall, just visible beneath the bed rail. It had been there since Rosalind's first week. It was wooden small, the size of a shoebox, perhaps slightly smaller with a simple latch. During the first month, one of the cleaning staff had moved it while doing floor care, setting it outside the door to sweep underneath. Rosalind had asked her very politely and without any explanation at all to please leave it where it was in the future. The cleaning staff left it where it was. Nobody asked what was in it. There are things you learn in a care facility about the objects people bring with them, that the objects are often doing work that the people cannot do themselves, and that the work deserves respect, even when you do not know what it is. Petra arrived at 10. She came every week without being reminded and without announcing herself in advance. She brought tangerines, Rosalind's preference, sharp and easy to peel, and a paperback she had found at a used bookshop near her apartment. She sat in the chair beside the bed, and they talked about the book Rosalind was currently reading and about the garden Petra was trying to keep alive on her apartment balcony. And for most of the hour, Petra held her grandmother's hand without being asked and without making anything of it. Before she left, Rosalind said, "You don't have to come every week, sweetheart." Petra said, "I know I don't have to." Rosalind looked at her. "That's why I like it when you do." After Petra left, the room was quiet. Amara was in the corridor finishing the afternoon chart updates when she heard it very soft coming from room 12. A melody barely voiced the kind of thing you hum when you are not quite aware you are humming. Not a sad melody. A teaching melody, the kind built for repetition, for showing a student how a phrase should move patient and precise and gentle with itself. Amara paused. She listened for a moment. Then she moved on. At 3:40 that afternoon, a letter arrived at the Cedarbrook front desk addressed to Rosalind Hester, room 12. The front of the envelope was blue. In the upper left corner, Cho and Associates Attorneys at Law. Across the center in red ink, a notation in careful handwriting, "Deliver to patient, only do not redirect." The receptionist on duty, following the protocol for specially marked correspondence, carried it directly to the room. Rosalind was asleep. The receptionist placed the envelope on the nightstand beside the photograph of Petra and left without waking her. Sometime in the night, the envelope slid behind the keepsake box off the edge of the nightstand down to the floor. It came to rest on the linoleum beside the box, visible only from floor level, invisible from standing height. Nobody saw it. Rosalind slept. The building was quiet. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. By Wednesday evening, Rosalind's temperature had climbed to 39.2 degrees, and Amara was on the night shift, and the cleaning cart had pushed the keepsake box sideways during the evening round, and the blue envelope was lying on the floor of a room 12 in plain sight of anyone who chose to look. If stories like this matter to you, stories about quiet people who were dismissed but never truly defeated, this channel was made for you. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. 14 months earlier, Derek and Carla arrived at Rosalind's house together, which they only did when something had been decided in advance. The brochures were already on the coffee table when Rosalind came in from the kitchen. She saw them before she sat down. She noted the one on top, Cedarbrook Care Center, a photograph of a sunlit common room on the cover, with a circle of blue ink around the name. She sat in her chair. She folded her hands in her lap. She waited for Derek to begin. He had prepared. She could tell by the way he opened, organized, thorough, moving from point to point with the fluency of a man who had rehearsed in the car. The house was too large to manage alone. The neighborhood had changed in ways he did not specify. Cedarbrook had excellent reviews, was only 20 minutes from Derek's office, had a garden and a common room, and medical staff available around the clock. "You'll be looked after properly, Mom." He paused. "We can't be here every day." He said the last sentence as if it explained something. It did. Carla nodded at the appropriate intervals. She had not circled the brochure that was Derek's ink, but she had not objected to it either, and the distance between those two things was smaller than she would have liked to believe. Rosalind listened to all of it. When Derek finished, she asked 3 questions. Could she bring her own things? Could Petra visit whenever Petra wanted to? And she looked at Derek directly with the level attention she had given 38 years of students when she wanted them to understand that she was listening precisely. What happens to the house? Derek said, "We'll manage it. Keep it in the family until we figure out the right arrangement." Rosalind looked at him for a moment longer than was entirely comfortable. Then she said, "All right." She did not say it as surrender. She said it the way she said many things with more behind it than the words contained. 1 week before the Cedarbrook move, Rosalind called Elaine Cho. She had used Elaine for 20 years. The will, a property boundary question in 2014, the power of attorney she had signed at Derek's request in the months after her husband died, when she was grieving and trusting, and Derek had said it would simplify things. Elaine had drafted all of it. This call was different. "Elaine, I'd like to talk about a trust. I'd like to do it before I move." A brief pause. "Come in tomorrow." The meeting was at 10 in the morning. Rosalind arrived 5 minutes early, which was her habit, and sat across from Elaine with the composed attention of a woman who knows what she wants and has thought carefully about how to ask for it. A revocable, living trust. All assets placed under the management of an independent trustee, the house, the joint savings account, the small investment account her husband had established in 1998, herself as sole beneficiary for the duration of her lifetime, full right to income, full right to occupancy, full right to revoke. Petra as successor, beneficiary after her death. Not Derek, not Carla. Elaine looked at her over the document. "You understand that this supersedes the power of attorney in terms of asset management. Any assets held in trust fall outside the scope of what a power of attorney can authorize." "Yes," Rosalind said. "Should I notify Derek that the trust has been established?" Rosalind considered this for exactly the amount of time it required. "Not yet," she said. "Let me move in first. Let's see what happens." What happened was, this 3 months after Rosalind moved into Cedarbrook, Derek came for a Sunday visit. He sat in the chair beside her bed and talked about the weather and about his work and about a restaurant he and his wife had tried the previous weekend. Then near the end of the visit, with the casual placement of a man presenting a decision rather than a question, he told her he had found a buyer for the house. A good offer. The market was right. He would handle everything. He did not ask. He presented. He believed his power of attorney that he had the authority to proceed. He did not know about the trust. He did not know that the house had been in trust for 3 months. He did not know that the power of attorney he held had no jurisdiction over trust assets and never had. He did not know any of this because Rosalind had not told him, and Elaine had not told him, and the trust document was filed and recorded and entirely silent. Rosalind said, "I see." After Derek left, she called Elaine. "The house has been listed, Elaine." "I know. I've been watching the county filings." Elaine's voice was steady. "The power of attorney cannot authorize that sale. The trust supersedes it. Any transfer of title on a trust asset without trustee authorization is invalid, regardless of what instruments are presented. I'm going to write to you formally." "Write to me here. Mark it for my hands only." "Of course." The first letter arrived 2 weeks later. Derek was visiting that day. He was at the reception desk when the mail came in. He signed for it without hesitation his mother's correspondence, he told the receptionist, and he would bring it to her himself. He did not bring it to her. He read it in his car in the parking lot, and then he drove home. The second letter arrived a month later. Derek was not there. A staff member accepted it at the desk and placed it in the family correspondence box. Derek collected the box on his next visit. He signed the log. The third letter was addressed more carefully marked urgent, flagged for direct delivery. It reached the nursing supervisor's desk. The supervisor, uncertain of the protocol for legal correspondence, placed it in the family communication folder pending clarification. Derek asked about pending correspondence on his next visit. He was helpful about it. He took the folder. The fourth letter was blue. It said in red ink in Elaine's own hand, "Deliver to patient. Only do not redirect." It reached room 12 on a Tuesday afternoon. It was on the floor by Wednesday night. She had known about the house from the moment Derek told her. She had known about the trust from the moment she signed it. She had been waiting for Elaine's letter for 4 months, through 3 failed deliveries, through the sale of the house, through 11 months in a room that was not her home. She had waited with the patience of a woman who had spent 38 years teaching children that the right note held long enough always resolves. Amara came on for the night shift at 7 p.m. on Wednesday and checked room 12 at 8:15 the way she always checked it first on nights when she had concerns from the previous shift. Rosalind was warm. Not alarming, not yet. The kind of warmth that is a warning rather than a condition, the body beginning to signal something before it has decided what. Amara noted it, adjusted the evening check interval, and moved on. At 9 p.m. she checked again, warmer. At 10:30 the thermometer read 39.2. Amara started the fever protocol, cool cloth fan adjusted to low fluids if Rosalind would take them vitals every 45 minutes. She updated the medical notes. She did not leave the floor. Rosalind moved in and out of the fever the way people do when it is climbing, not fully conscious, not fully unconscious, present in pieces. She murmured something at one point that Amara couldn't make out. A little later, more clearly, a single word. Petra. Then she was quiet again. The corridor outside was the particular quiet of a care facility at 11 p.m., not silent, but reduced to its essential sounds. The hum of the ventilation system, a television from somewhere down the East Hall, the soft report of footsteps on linoleum. At 11:45, the cleaning cart came around the west corridor. Amara stepped out of the nurse's station and directed it away from room 12. Rosalind was in light sleep. The rattling of the cart wheels would wake her, and waking a feverish patient at midnight to clean a floor that could wait until morning was the kind of decision that Amara did not allow on her shift. The cart redirected. On its way past the doorframe, one wheel caught the threshold. Inside room 12, the keepsake box shifted slightly where it sat under the bed rail. The blue envelope, already half out from behind the box since sometime Tuesday, dislodged by the same cleaning cart on its evening round, slid the remaining distance into the open floor. Amara entered room 12 at midnight for the vitals check. She saw the envelope immediately, not because she was looking for it, because she always looked at the floor. 11 years of night nursing had made it a reflex, not a conscious act, just the particular attentiveness that develops when you have worked enough midnight shifts to know that things fall, things slide, and that a fall on a linoleum floor at midnight is the kind of event that changes the remaining years of a 79-year-old patient in ways that cannot always be undone. You look at floors. You look before you step, and you look when you enter a room, and you look when something has shifted that was not shifted before. She bent down and picked up the envelope. She straightened and read the front. Rosalind Hester, Room 12, Cedar Brook Care Center. The return address in the upper left corner, Cho and Associates Attorneys at Law. And across the center of the envelope, in red ink and handwriting that was careful and deliberate and had been written by someone who intended it to be read, "Deliver to patient, only do not redirect fourth notice." Amara read it. She read the last 2 words again. Fourth notice. She turned the envelope over. Sealed, undamaged. She looked at Rosalind asleep, her silver hair loose against the pillow, her breathing shallow, her face carrying the particular exhaustion of a fever, working through a body that is 79 years old and has been working hard all evening, unaware, entirely unaware. Amara looked at the envelope. She was a night nurse. She was not a lawyer, not an investigator, not anyone whose professional role required her to interpret legal correspondence or draw conclusions about its history. She did not open the envelope. She would not open the envelope. That was not her decision to make. But she read fourth notice a third time, and she did the arithmetic that those 2 words contained. 4 letters sent, this one in her hand, which meant 3 previous letters sent to this address to this patient marked for direct delivery and not delivered. She thought about the mail procedures at Cedarbrook, which she knew the way she knew all the procedures because knowing procedures was part of knowing how a place worked, and knowing how a place worked was part of keeping her patients safe. She thought about the sign-in log at the reception desk. She thought about who came to visit Rosalind Hester. She thought about the keepsake box under the bed that the cleaning staff had been politely and firmly asked never to touch. She thought about the fact that Rosalind had stopped humming 3 weeks ago. She folded the envelope carefully along its existing crease. She placed it in the breast pocket of her scrubs, not back on the floor, not in the keepsake box, not at the nurse's station where it could be seen and moved and signed for by anyone who presented themselves at the desk with a plausible reason. On her person, where she could account for it at every moment until morning. She checked the thermometer. 39.8. She adjusted the fan. She refilled the water cup. She pulled the chair from the corner of the room to the place beside the bed, where she could see both the door and the patient without turning her head. She sat down. At 3 a.m., the fever broke. The temperature dropped to 38.1 over 40 minutes, then to 37.6. Rosalind's breathing steadied. The restlessness went out of her. She slept the deeper, easier sleep of a body that has come through something and is resting on the other side of it. Amara stayed until 4:30. Then she did her final round of the corridor and returned to the nurse's station. She opened the shift communication log, not the medical record, the handover log, the non-clinical notebook that the facility used to pass information between shifts about things that were not strictly medical but were worth knowing. She wrote in her own handwriting with the time noted at the top blue envelope found on floor of room 12 during fever check. Marked deliver to patient-only fourth notice return address, Cho and Associates Attorneys at Law. Held by this nurse pending patient recovery. Do not relay to family visitors until patient has been advised. She signed it, she dated it, she closed the log. She clocked off at 7 a.m. She had been a nurse for 11 years, and she had never written a note like that before. She did not know what was in the envelope. She knew what fourth notice meant. She knew what it meant that 3 previous notices had not reached a patient who received mail at a facility that logged all deliveries. And she knew that the woman in room 12 had stopped humming 3 weeks ago, and that things that stop suddenly in a person you know are always worth paying attention to. Amara came back at 9:15 on Thursday morning in her own clothes, a dark coat, flat shoes, the blue envelope in her left pocket. She had slept 4 hours and woken up before her alarm with the specific alertness of someone whose mind had continued working after their body stopped. She stopped at the nursing station first. The charge nurse, Patricia, was at the desk. Amara took the shift communication log from the rack and opened it to her entry from 4:30 a.m. She set it on the desk without preamble and waited while Patricia read it. Patricia read it once. She read it again. She found the notation fourth notice, and her expression shifted in the particular way of someone doing arithmetic they don't like the result of. She looked up. The delivery log, she said, from the previous months. Derek Hester signed for 2 of them, Amara said. The third went into the family communication folder. He collected it on his next visit. Patricia looked at the log entry for another moment. Then she closed it. I'll go with you, she said. Room 12 was quiet in the morning light. Rosalind was sitting up in bed working through breakfast slowly, the particular careful eating of someone who has come through a fever and is reassessing what the body wants. She looked up when the door opened. When she saw Amara, her expression moved through mild surprise and into something warmer. You came in on your day off. I found something last night, Amara said. I wanted to give it to you myself. She took the blue envelope from her coat pocket and held it out. Rosalind looked at it. She recognized it before she touched it, the color of the return address visible in the upper left corner, the red notation across the center. Her hands were steady when she reached out and took it. She did not open it immediately. She held it for a moment the way you hold something you have been waiting for long enough that the arrival requires a breath before the opening. Then she opened it. She read slowly. The letter from Elaine ran to 2 pages, methodical, complete, written in the clear legal prose of someone who had been waiting 4 months to deliver this information and wanted to be certain nothing was ambiguous. The trust established before the move properly executed and recorded. The sale of the house conducted under a power of attorney that had no jurisdiction over trust assets and therefore no legal authority to authorize any transfer of title. 3 previous letters sent to this address. Elaine's readiness to file immediately upon Rosalind's instruction with the full documentation of the trust, the sale, and the chain of correspondence already prepared. Rosalind read it twice. She folded it along its original crease. She placed it on her lap with her hands flat on top of it. Amara waited. Rosalind said, "The previous letters, you looked at the delivery log." "Yes." "Who signed for them?" Amara told her Derek's name twice with the dates. The third letter, the family communication folder, the visit on which it was collected. Rosalind nodded once, a single precise movement, the nod of a woman confirming something she had already understood in outline and was now receiving in detail. "I thought it might be something like that," she said. She was not surprised. She was not performing the absence of surprise. She had simply genuinely been waiting for the shape of it to become clear, and now it had. She looked at Amara. "I need to make a phone call, but first I need to ask you something." "Yes?" "The shift log entry you wrote last night. Is it in the permanent record? Non-clinical handover log, time-stamped, hand-signed." Amara met her eyes. "It cannot be amended without a countersignature from the charge nurse. Patricia has already reviewed it this morning." Rosalind was quiet for a moment. Something settled in her face, not relief exactly, but the expression of a woman who has been managing a long patience and has just received confirmation that the patience was correctly placed. She picked up her phone. She dialed from memory. Elaine answered on the second ring. "Elaine, the 4th letter arrived. I have it." A pause. "I'm ready." She listened for a moment. "There's one more thing. There is a nurse here at Cedarbrook named Amara O.C. She found the envelope last night and held it for me, and this morning she came in on her day off to deliver it personally. She wrote an entry in the facility's shift log last night, time-stamped permanent record documenting the envelope and the notation. I think you should add her name to the file." She listened again. "Good," she said. "Then let's begin." She ended the call and set the phone on the blanket beside her. Elaine would file an emergency motion to invalidate the property sale trust assets, transferred without trustee authorization, the power of attorney having no legal scope over trust property. The buyer would have remedies against Derek for failure to disclose an encumbrance. The trust itself was intact, properly administered, untouched by anything Derek had done, because nothing Derek had done had the legal authority to touch it. The assets were not gone. They were frozen in a dispute that Elaine was now fully equipped to resolve with 4 months of documentation, a recorded trust, and a nursing facility's shift log entered into evidence. The room was quiet. After a moment, Rosalind looked at Amara. "You stayed the whole night." "Your fever didn't break until 3:30. "You stayed after that." "Yes." Rosalind looked at her. "Why?" Amara thought about this not because she didn't know the answer, but because the answer deserved to be said correctly. "When I was training," she said, "my supervisor told me a patient who stops doing the thing they always do is telling you something." She paused. "You stopped humming 3 weeks ago." The room was completely still. Patricia had stepped back to the doorway. The morning light came in flat and clean across the windowsill, across the sheet music, across the photograph of Petra on the nightstand. Rosalind said, "What was I telling you?" Amara said, "That something was wrong, and that you were carrying it alone." Rosalind looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed her hand briefly over Amara's, once a single gesture, the particular touch of a woman who has spent her life teaching people to listen and has just been heard completely. She did not say anything else. She didn't need to. "Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Has someone ever dismissed you or someone you loved and later realized how wrong they were? Tell me in the comments. I rid every single one." Elaine filed the emergency motion on Friday morning. By 2 p.m, Derek's attorney had a copy. By 3:15, Derek had read it 3 times and was standing in his kitchen calling Carla. He explained it the way he understood it, which was partially. The trust he had not known about any trust. The power of attorney, which he had believed gave him full authority to manage their mother's assets. The sale, which he had executed in good faith, he said, using that phrase with the particular emphasis of a man who needs it to mean more than it does. Carla listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked one question. "When did Mom set up the trust?" Derek said, 1 week before she moved to Cedar Brook. Carla was quiet. She set it up before she moved Derek. He began to explain the timing was a coincidence she must have been advised by Elaine independently. There was no reason to think. She set it up 1 week before she moved. Carla's voice was not raised. It was the voice of a woman who has just understood something she should have understood earlier and is now holding it very carefully. She already knew she was going to Cedar Brook when she did it. She knew, and she went to Elaine and she built the trust, and then she moved. A pause. She was prepared before she walked through the door. Derek said, "I didn't know about the trust." "I know you didn't." Another pause longer. "But you signed for her letters, Derek, twice. Letters marked patient only. You signed for mail addressed to a patient at a care facility that you knew was from her attorney, and you took it and you didn't give it to her." Derek did not answer this directly. It was the moment not announced, not dramatic, simply present when Carla began to understand her brother in a way she had not before, and to understand herself in the way she had been avoiding. The legal assessment arrived in Derek's email at 5 p.m. His attorney was thorough and did not soften it. The revocable living trust had been properly executed and recorded prior to any of the transactions Derek had conducted. A power of attorney is an instrument of personal agency. It authorizes an attorney, in fact, to act in the place of the principal for personal assets. It has no jurisdiction over assets held in trust, which are the property of the trust, managed by the trustee, and outside the principal's personal estate entirely. Derek had conveyed title to property he had no standing to convey. The buyer had purchased in good faith and had remedies. The interception of legal correspondence addressed to a patient at a care facility and signed for under his own name introduced the question of bad faith into a proceeding that would not benefit from it. "This is not a dispute you can win," and the attorney wrote. "The trust is properly executed, the power of attorney is categorically inapplicable to trust assets, and the correspondence record adds a layer of potential bad faith the court will take seriously. You need to settle this, and you need to do it before a judge looks at the delivery log." Derek called Rosalind. She answered on the third ring. He began the way he always began, organized, measured, the careful opening of a man who is prepared for the conversation. She let him get 4 sentences in. "Derek!" Her voice was the voice she used in 38 years of classrooms for the moment when the approach needed to change. "I'm not going to discuss this on the phone. Come to Cedar Brook on Sunday. Come alone." "Why alone?" "Because this conversation is between us. Not between lawyers, not between you and Carla. Between you and me." A pause. "Sunday." She ended the call. Carla called Petra that evening. She had decided sometime between Derek's call and the end of the day that she was going to start doing the things she should have been doing all along, telling people the truth, beginning with the people who deserved it most. She told Petra everything, the trust, the letters, the delivery log, Derek's signatures, the legal filing. She told it in sequence without editorializing, and she did not soften the parts that reflected badly on herself. Petra listened to all of it. She was quiet for a long moment after Carla finished. Then she said, "I'm going to see Grandma." Carla said she asked Derek to come Sunday. Petra said, "I'm not Derek." She arrived at Cedar Brook at 4 that afternoon with a bag of tangerines and no agenda. She did not arrive with questions or with the weight of what she had just learned or with the need to process it in her grandmother's presence. She arrived the way she always arrived because Rosalind was there and because that was sufficient reason. Room 12 was in its afternoon quiet. Rosalind was sitting in the chair by the window, the sheet music on her lap, her reading glasses in her hand, rather than on her face not reading, just resting with the familiar weight of the pages. She looked up when Petra came in. Something in her face eased. Petra sat beside her. She put the tangerines on the table. She did not ask Rosalind to explain anything because Carla had already told her, and because asking Rosalind to explain things she had carried alone for 11 months seemed like the wrong use of an afternoon. They sat for a while in the way they had always sat, the particular comfortable quiet of two people who do not require the space between them to be filled. Eventually, Rosalind looked at the photograph on the nightstand, the one that had been there since the first week Petra and Rosalind, a summer afternoon, Petra 21, and laughing at something off camera. She said, "Your great-grandmother used to say that the people who stay through the difficult parts are the ones who earn the good parts." Petra looked at her. "Is that why you put me in the trust?" "Yes," Rosalind said. A pause. "You always came, every week. Nobody asked you to." Petra said, "I know." Rosalind looked at her, the complete unhurried look of a woman who has been watching someone for 11 months and has seen everything she needed to see. "That's exactly why." Petra had visited every week for 11 months. She hadn't known about the trust. She hadn't visited because of what she might receive. She visited because her grandmother was there, and because love does not require a reason to show up. Rosalind had known that. She had been watching it quietly for 11 months, and she had placed the most important thing she had in the hands of the person who deserved it most. Derek arrived at 11 on Sunday morning with a visitor badge and no agenda he was willing to name, which was itself a kind of progress. The receptionist directed him down the west corridor. He had not been to Cedarbrook in 6 weeks. The last visit had been brief, purposeful, the kind of visit organized around something to be done rather than someone to be seen. He walked to room 12 and knocked. Rosalind said, "Come in." She was in the armchair by the window, not the bed. She had chosen it deliberately, sitting upright. Her hands folded in her lap, the morning light coming in behind her. She was dressed properly, her silver hair arranged. The keepsake box sat on the table beside her. Derek's eyes found it and moved away without lingering the way you look at something you have always meant to ask about and never have. He sat in the chair across from her. Rosalind looked at him for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "Derek, when did you decide I couldn't manage my own affairs?" He began with the house, the size of it, the maintenance, the neighborhood. He moved to the estate, to the paperwork after his father's death, to the efficiency of having one person handling the complexity of it. His voice was measured. He had prepared. She waited until he finished. "That's the explanation," she said. "I asked for the decision. When did you decide?" He was quiet. "After Dad died," he said. Rosalind said, "Yes, I thought so." She looked at her son, not with anger, not with coldness, with the complete attention of a woman who has spent 38 years understanding what people mean when they speak and what they mean when they stop. "Your father's death frightened you," she said. "You wanted to manage the things that were frightening you. I understand that." A pause. "But I was not a thing to be managed, Derek. I was the person who needed to grieve, and instead I had paperwork in front of me and a pen in my hand and a son who needed me to sign something." Derek said, "I thought I was helping." Rosalind said, "I know you did." She said it without softening it and without sharpening it. As a fact. 3 letters from Elaine Cho were delivered to Cedarbrook over the past 4 months, she said. "Addressed to me, marked for direct delivery. Your name is on the reception delivery log twice." He started to speak. I didn't read them. I signed for them and I brought them home and..." He stopped. She waited. "I didn't open them," he said. "You didn't deliver them." He had no answer for this. The room was quiet. "That is the thing I need you to understand, Derek. Not what you intended. What you did. What you actually did." Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. "You signed your name in a log at a care facility to take possession of legal correspondence addressed to a patient. You did that. Whatever you told yourself about it, that is what you did." Derek looked at the floor. After a moment, he said, "What do you want to happen now, with the house, with the legal?" "Elaine will handle the legal situation. That is not why I asked you to come." She looked at him steadily. "I asked you to come because you are my son, and I love you, and I need you to understand what happened here, not the legal version of it, the real version." She reached beside her and picked up the keepsake box. She unlatched it and opened it and set it on the table between them. Derek looked inside. A concert program folded printed on pale yellow paper from a spring concert at Jefferson High, 1998. A handwritten note on lined paper, a student's handwriting that said, "Mrs. Hester, thank you for not giving up on me." A photograph Rosalind and her husband standing in the front yard of the house the first summer they lived there, 1989, both of them squinting into the sun, both of them young in the way you don't know you are until later. That was most of it. Derek looked at these things for a long moment. "I kept the things that mattered," Rosalind said. "Not the house. The things that happened in the house. The house was where these things occurred. I was never confused about which one I was keeping." Derek said, "I didn't think you'd—" "I know what you didn't think." Not sharp, simply true. The sentence of a woman who has been paying attention. "You didn't think I had planned ahead of you. You didn't think I had a lawyer and a trust and the patience to wait for the right moment. You didn't think about what I might have done quietly in advance because you had decided that quiet meant unprepared." She looked at him. "You taught yourself a story about your mother that was smaller than your mother. That is what I would like you to reconsider." Derek was quiet for a long time. "Then, can I ask what's in the trust after—" "After I die," Rosalind said. She said it without ceremony. "Yes, you can ask." She told him the assets the trustee structure Petra named as successor beneficiary. He listened. He did not argue. He nodded once, the nod of a man receiving information he cannot change and has decided not to contest. "Petra comes every week," Rosalind said. "She has since I moved here, week after week with tangerines and a book, and no reason except that she wanted to. I watched her do that for 11 months. She looked at the keepsake box. "I gave her the thing that should go to someone who knows how to stay." She paused. "I gave you 38 years of breakfast and school runs and driving lessons and every difficult conversation you did not want to have. You received all of those things. You don't always remember them, but you received them." She closed the keepsake box. "That is also something." He stayed for 2 hours. At some point, Rosalind offered him a tangerine from the bowl Petra had left, and he took it without thinking, and they sat in the Sunday quiet of room 12 with the light moving across the floor and nothing legal said for a long time. He left at 1 o'clock. At the door he said he was sorry. The short sorry. The real one. She said she knew. She meant it. We're almost at the end of this story. If it's moved you, if it feels like something you've lived through, subscribe. Stories like Rosalind's deserve to be heard. The letter arrived on a Tuesday addressed to Amara Osei Care of Cedar Brook Care Center. She found it in the staff mail slot at the nurse's station at the start of her day shift between a facilities memo and a continuing education notice. She looked at the return address, Cho and Associates Attorneys at Law. She opened it at the station, standing up the way you open things when you are not sure what they are. The letter from Elaine was brief and precise, the formal register of a lawyer writing for the record, but warm underneath it in the way of someone who chose their words carefully and had chosen these ones carefully too. It stated that the shift log entry Amara had made on the night of the fever had been entered into the court record as documentary evidence, specifically as documentation of the timeline of the blue envelope's receipt and chain of custody from the moment it was found on the floor of room 12 to the moment it was delivered to Rosalind Hester the following morning. Amara's account was cited in the filing. Her name was in the court document. She read that sentence twice. Attached to the letter, clipped to the back with a single paper clip, was a handwritten note on plain white paper. The penmanship was precise and deliberate, the handwriting of someone who had learned it from a generation that considered it a discipline and had never unlearned that. "Amara, you found what I needed on a night I couldn't find it myself. You kept it safe. You came back on your day off. Thank you is too small. I'll keep saying it anyway." The charge nurse, Patricia, came around the corner of the station with a clipboard and paused when she saw Amara's expression. Something good. Amara said Mrs. Hester sent a note. Patricia set down the clipboard and read it over Amara's shoulder. She did not say anything when she finished. She put one hand briefly on Amara's shoulder, a single, unhurried pat, and picked up her clipboard and walked on. That was sufficient. It was exactly sufficient. Amara went to room 12 on her break. Rosalind was in the chair by the window with the sheet music in her lap, not the same page she had been on for the past several weeks, Amara noticed. A different piece. She had been moving through the music more quickly since the fever broke, the way someone moves through things when they are reclaiming something they had set down. She looked up when Amara came in. Amara said, "I got your note." Rosalind said, "I meant it." "I know you did." Amara sat down in the chair across from her. "Mrs. Hester, I want to say something. I didn't do anything unusual. I found an envelope on the floor. I kept it safe. I wrote it in the log. Those are ordinary things." Rosalind looked at her with the full patient attention she gave everything. "Amara," she said, "do you know how many envelopes on floors have been kicked under beds and never mentioned Amara didn't answer. "Ordinary things done at the right moment by the right person are not ordinary," Rosalind said. "They just look that way afterward because they worked." They sat quietly for a moment. Outside the window, the November light was thin and steady. Amara said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes. When you came here, when you moved into Cedarbrook, did you know something like this would happen?" Rosalind considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. She did not answer immediately. "I knew Derek would try to manage things he hadn't been asked to manage," she said. "I had watched him do that for 3 years after his father died. I knew he believed he was being responsible." A pause. "I didn't know the house would be sold. I hoped the trust would be enough that Elaine's letter would reach me, that the legal mechanism would do its work." She looked at the sheet music in her lap. "I planned for documents and lawyers and a trustee and a recorded filing." She looked up. "I didn't plan for you." Amara said, "Me? I didn't plan for a nurse who would notice when I stopped humming." Rosalind said it simply as a fact, the way she said most things. "I didn't plan for someone who would come back on her day off. Those things were not in my plan." A pause. "They were better than my plan." She looked at Amara. "The best parts usually are." Amara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You sound like a music teacher." Rosalind said, "I had 38 years of practice." The legal situation was resolving. Elaine's emergency motion had resulted in a negotiated settlement. Derek would make the trust whole. From his personal assets, the buyer would receive compensation for the title defect from Derek directly, and the trust's integrity was formally restored. In the court record, the house was gone. Rosalind had made her peace with that in the way you make peace with things that were never truly the point the house had been, where her life happened, not the life itself, and she had packed the life into 3 bags and a keepsake box and carried it to room 12 and arranged it with a small rug and sheet music on the windowsill and a photograph of Petra on the nightstand. She had what she needed. Amara left room 12 and closed the door behind her. She was 3 steps down the corridor when she heard it faint from behind the closed door. The teaching melody. The one built for repetition, for showing a phrase how to move. Patient and precise and entirely itself. Amara stopped. She stood in the corridor and listened for a moment, not long, just long enough to be certain of what she was hearing. Then she smiled. A brief, private thing, the smile you have when something that was interrupted resumes. She continued her rounds. She was humming again. Amara had been listening for it for 3 weeks since the morning she wrote the shift log entry, and understood after the fact that the reason she had noticed the envelope was the same reason she had noticed the silence. She had been paying attention. That was all. It turned out that was everything. Reading. 6 months after the fever night, Cedarbrook held its annual resident celebration on a Saturday afternoon in April. The activities coordinator had put a sign-up sheet on the common room bulletin board. 3 weeks earlier, residents who wished to perform, share something, or simply say a few words were welcome. The sheet had 4 names on it by the end of the first week. On the 8th day, a 5th name was added in careful, precise handwriting: Rosalind Hester, room 12. The coordinator had looked at it for a moment. Then she had gone to find the key to the piano. The upright had been donated 4 years ago by the family of a former resident. It had been tuned once when it arrived, and played occasionally in the first year and then left mostly alone. The coordinator had it tuned again the week before the celebration. She did not tell Rosalind she had done this. She simply did it. The common room was arranged with chairs in a rough semicircle, the piano at the open end. 12 residents, a scatter of staff, a handful of family visitors in the back rows, the particular mix of people who show up for these things. Some who came because they wanted to, some who came because they felt they should, and a few who were not entirely sure which category they were in. Petra was in the front row. She had arrived 45 minutes early while the chairs were still being unfolded and taken the seat directly in front of the piano bench without apology or explanation. She was wearing the yellow jacket she wore when she wanted to look like she had made an effort. She had brought tangerines in her bag out of habit and then realized there was nowhere to put them and was now holding the bag in her lap. Amara was there in civilian clothes, dark trousers, a green top, her hair down. She had written the date in her phone calendar on the Tuesday Rosalind mentioned it, and she had arranged her shifts accordingly, and she had arrived 10 minutes before the event began and taken a seat 3 rows back where she could see the piano and the door and Petra's yellow jacket all at once. Near the back, in a chair slightly apart from the main arrangement, Derek sat with his coat folded across his lap. He had not told Rosalind he was coming. He had called Petra the previous Wednesday and asked simply if it would be all right. Petra had said, "Come." He had come. The activities coordinator said a few brief words. The first resident performed a poem read from a printed sheet about a garden. The second played a recording of himself singing 40 years ago and listened to it with his eyes closed. The third told a story about her mother that made 2 people in the back row cry quietly. Then Rosalind walked to the piano. She adjusted the bench before she sat. It was a 1/4 inch too high, and she lowered it with the same unhurried precision she had used on every piano bench in every classroom for 38 years. She settled herself. She placed her hands on the keys without playing yet, and looked at the room, at Petra in the yellow jacket, at Amara 3 rows back, at the charge nurse standing by the door, at the 12 residents in their chairs, at Derek in the back, with his coat on his lap. She took a breath. She began to play. The Schubert Impromptu in G-flat major. She had taught it for 30 years, had used it specifically with advanced students because it has a long middle section that moves through uncertainty before it resolves, and she had always believed that patience with difficulty was something you could teach with the right piece of music if you let the student sit inside the difficulty long enough to understand it. She was not a concert pianist. She had never been a concert pianist. She was a teacher, and she played with the authority of someone who understands music from the inside rather than from the surface, not performing the emotion, but following it the way you follow a path you have walked enough times to trust even in the dark. The common room was completely still. Petra had her hands in her lap and was not moving. Amara had her eyes on Rosalind's hands. In the back row, Derek was watching his mother the way you watch someone when you are trying to see them correctly, when you have understood that you are not seeing them correctly before, and are making a deliberate effort to adjust. The middle section moved through its uncertainty. The phrases turned and returned and turned again. Rosalind played without sheet music. She had not needed sheet music for this piece in 20 years. Her hands knew it. Her body knew it. Some knowledge is stored in places that do not forget. The resolution came not sudden, not triumphant, but arrived at the way the right things arrive, through patience, through the long passage of the difficult section, through staying with the music until it found its way to where it was always going. Rosalind lifted her hands from the keys. The room was quiet for a moment, the particular quiet that follows music that has done what music is supposed to do. Then the applause came, small room, applause genuine and unhurried. Petra was the first. Both hands leaning forward slightly in her chair, the yellow jacket bright in the common room light. Rosalind sat at the piano for a moment without turning. She looked at the keys. She thought about the first time she had played this piece 26 years old, a student herself sitting at a practice room piano at 11 at night because she had finally understood the middle section and needed to play it through before she lost the understanding. She thought about 38 years of students who had sat where she was sitting, hands on these keys, or others learning patience from a piece of music because their teacher had believed that was something music could teach. She thought about a green canvas bag that had traveled with her to this room and hung on the hook by the back door and been opened finally at the right moment. She thought about Theodore not with grief, not anymore, but with the particular warmth of someone who has been loved well and knows it. She turned on the bench to face the room. She looked at Petra, who was still clapping with her whole self the way she had done everything always without reservation. She looked at Amara, who was not clapping yet, but was smiling the private smile of someone who has been listening for something and is hearing it. She looked at Derek in the back row, who was clapping quietly and looking at her with an expression she recognized, the expression of someone recalibrating, revising the story they have told themselves, making it larger. She folded her hands in her lap. She had come to Cedarbrook 11 months ago with 3 bags and a keepsake box and a trust she had signed 1 week before she walked through the door. She had lost a house and found a room. She had been invisible and been seen. She had been carried through a fever night by a woman who noticed when she stopped humming. She was 79 years old. She was sitting at a piano that had been tuned for her without her asking. The people she loved were in the room. She was not going to waste any of this. She turned back to the piano. She played one more piece, shorter, lighter, the kind of thing she had used at the end of recitals for 30 years to send students home happy. The room responded to it the way audiences always responded to that piece. They leaned back, they exhaled. 2 of the residents began to nod along without knowing they were doing it. When she finished, Petra said from the front row, "One more." Rosalind said, "That's what they always say." Petra said, "Because you always have one more." Rosalind looked at her granddaughter, 24 years old, tangerines in her bag, yellow jacket, front row seat, arrived at 45 minutes early. The person who had come every week for 11 months with no reason except love, which had turned out to be the only reason that mattered. She turned back to the piano. She played one more.